the complexity of what goes on within biology, which is misrepresented for political reasons, for economic reasons, for ideological reasons, comes from misuse of language, comes from misinterpretation of data, intentional fraudulent things being put in there, additional conclusions being drawn, which actually weren't part of what was shown, but you just tack it on the end and you're good enough to fool people into thinking that that's a valid conclusion to also draw. And if you're good with language, you can fool a lot of people, because most people are really lazy with their language, especially today, after decades of the education system being defunded and degraded, and they've made being a teacher a misery. What they have done to the schooling system is appalling. By having valid data, even just mostly valid data, even just some valid data, a lot of people won't even check any of it. So you could have completely invalid data. The more valid data you have, the easier it is to fool people. And a lot of people won't even understand that having all valid data does not mean that there isn't a lie following. Because what you're talking about is the whole explanation, the whole reasoning of whatever you're trying to claim. The data is just what you're using for your evidence, for your argument to make the claim. And that's why even otherwise highly intelligent, well-educated, and arguably expert in their field people can believe complete bullshit has been proven as fact when it was not. And this is how they perpetrate the fraud. And especially where they get you so scared that you're not thinking. If you're the kind of person who can be easily manipulated when you feel afraid, always take a minute to think of who's making money out of this? What's the agenda here? How long have I got to find out what the truth really is before the supposed consequences are going to hit? All these kind of questions should go through your mind so that you can determine how long you've got to research what's really going on. And if it seems suspicious, if somebody's telling you, for example, and this is a big one, which is a real huge lie, and I see it all the time, especially in the advertisements on TV from drug companies or from government agencies, where the governments are kind of covering for the drug companies by doing the ad for them to warn you about some disease. But so now you can't sue the drug company because the drug company didn't make the claim, it was the government. If you hear somebody saying, this disease can strike anyone at any time, I guarantee you that person just lied to you. Now, they might not have known they're lying because maybe they're just an actor who's just doing a voiceover part and getting paid for a TV commercial. Fine, okay, yep, true, that's a possibility. The person who engineered that statement, they were lying every single time. There is no such thing as a magical disease which for no reason can just strike anyone at any time. Bull fucking shit. Bullshit. It cannot happen that way. You are arguing a case for magic. Everything has a cause and causal pathway. You do not have people wandering around, minding their own business, and suddenly, Shazam, you've got leprosy. That doesn't fucking happen with any fucking disease. Just because you don't know where the disease came from, just because you don't know what the cause was, doesn't mean that it happened to anyone at any time for no reason. And just because you didn't specifically state for no reason at the end, does not mean that that's not what those words mean. If you've said can strike anyone at any time and you stopped there, then you are saying for no reason, because anyone at any time is no reason. So do not lie to people like that, and don't be fooled by people who lie to you like that. Because it's what? It's a fear campaign. They want you to buy medicines. They want you to be their chemical guinea pig, and they want to make a stack of money. And I would actually say the same thing, not just about what some supposed medicines can do, but what certain food additives can do. There are many of them that aren't just harmful, but they are hazardous. I was talking about mistaken identity with respect to viruses, which is just talking about them being like a separate organism, a pathogenic organism. But in reality, all they are is just this evolved ability to share genes in a particular way, in addition to the way that cells can split and the way that complex creatures can breed sexually. Another way of sharing genetic information. It just happens to be it's really resource intensive. I mean, just imagine this: potentially, billions or trillions of copies of this virus, making copies of and sharing copies of genetic material. How resource intensive do you think that is? Right? You have to be young and fit and reasonably healthy to cope with it. Now, you'll be walking around encountering a whole bunch of viruses, and maybe like they contain genetic information which you've already got. So what does your body do? And this is how we get the second mistaken identity of immunity. So I'll just go into this. Because this is actually a service being performed for your body by a specialized chemical function, which we'll call a virus, which uploads, replicates, and shares and spreads around genetic information, right? That's what it does. And it even does so externally to you. If you haven't seen this genetic material before, then your body wants to let it do its job first. Why? Because you want to get those genes. There will be definitely mechanisms to be sure as to whether or not, this is something that you want to interact with. Because if you were to see a virus from another species and it wasn't really compatible with you, it wasn't really useful to you, then why would your body want to waste so many resources and all the stress it's going to go through in just replicating the genes? This is separate from whether or not a gene replicated and spread throughout the cells of your body is actually incorporated into the nucleus. That would be a different matter, right? And I don't know enough to comment about that, but I will say this much. I will again bet money that there are defense mechanism stuff to ensure that would not happen under normal conditions unless it was something that the body wanted to do, which is another reason for coming to the conclusion that it is highly likely that this junk DNA area is where the things are really kind of going on a lot of the time, because that sort of creates a little kind of buffer and working zone to then decide what might actually interact with the nucleus where necessary. Now, it could be something else as well. That's all fine. Doesn't matter because it doesn't change the overall argument. The point here is that these things are doing a job. They are too small and too dumb a mechanism to know when to stop doing their job. It is impossible for them to have the only information which would actually tell them when to stop doing their job. Therefore, we know that there needs to be another mechanism of stopping them from doing their job, because otherwise they're just going to keep on doing it and we'll just keep going through this stress. So what is the body doing? Well, the body is very, very efficient, very pragmatic, and very smart at doing things in a simple way. If you haven't seen the genes before, what does it do? Well, it gives you 3 to 5 days for these things to do their job, and then the mistaken identity of the immune system kicks in and starts wiping them out. Why? Because you've got to stop them. Like, they've done their job, just get rid of them, right? So that's what the body does. But it gives it 3 to 5 days before it ramps up to do its job. If you've seen the genes before, it's suddenly able to kick in a lot faster and it wipes them out really quick and you don't even notice it. So you don't get any symptoms of anything. Like, even if you might otherwise be a bit vulnerable and weak and get sick, like on this occasion, presuming you're at least above a certain level, even if you are otherwise stressed and resource depleted, you probably, maybe you get the sniffles or something, but nothing serious. So why is that? And it's gone really quickly. Why? Because the body is very pragmatic. It doesn't like wasting resources. It doesn't like enduring unnecessary stress. So what does it do? It says, okay, no need for this, wipes them out faster. Because it can recognize them, it knows that's the same thing, and it just kicks in and starts producing what's necessary to wipe them out. Now, this is mistaken for immunity, and I guess in some regards it's an appropriate name, accepting that it is misleading because it's hand in hand with the implication that the virus was a contagion or a vector of contagion, but that's not what's going on. Any disease you form is simply the consequence of the stress and resource load of all the gene replication and any other conditions that you happen to be suffering at the same time, which you may or may not even be aware of. So you could also be on the edge of some other disease, and then you get a virus come in, which creates this big resource load and the stress, and all of a sudden that disease kicks in, right? Now, we might argue the disease caused it. We might argue the disease was the virus caused it, or arguing that the virus carried this disease, and there you go, bang, it manifested. But that's just a misinterpretation of data. The next time you encounter, the same things, your body knows, yep, cool, just wipe it out. And that way, minimizing any resource load, minimizing any stress, right? Because you don't want to repeat a process which is completely redundant. The body doesn't tend to do that kind of thing unless it's in a state of dysfunction already. I mean, there are reasons why you might still name it immune system in total, given like that it's not just viruses that our bodies are dealing with. So as an overall name, this is how people recognize these various, it's actually a collection of systems. So it's actually not even one system, but we call it the immune system. But there's actually many, many, many things kicking in. Like there are repair mechanisms for genetic damage. And if you didn't repair that genetic damage, you would probably get sick. You would form a disease. So therefore, one could argue that in fighting that disease, your immunity, your immune system includes this system of genetic repair. You know, it really depends on how you want to look at the language. Bacterium in your bloodstream, which is where it's not supposed to be, is eating your blood, eating your body tissue, excreting its wastes into your bloodstream, which your kidneys and liver and spleen and everything have to deal with, and your body has to kind of wipe out these bacterium faster than they're replicating in this amazing food supply for them. So your body's got to be able to do this really fast. Now, you know your body's good at that because if you get a cut, you don't have to put a disinfectant on it unless you are in some way immune compromised already and you want to like just make sure that you don't get an infection. But I'll just give you an example of this. I was hiking down a mountain, which I would frequently hike, and I fell over on multiple occasions. And on one of these occasions, on my knee, just big flap of skin, and it hurt, like it just hanging off. It was still connected by a little bit, but then there was like, because it was raining as well. And so there's mud and little stones and twigs and leaves and probably bits of bird shit and dead animals and stuff. And because this mountain was a popular place for hiking, there was human piss and shit most likely kind of coming down the mountain. There were sections that actually smelt really bad, which was a real shame the way that people would trash the mountain. But yeah, look, I mean, I got like all this mud and stuff jammed in the cut. And the reason I fell was because my ankle just collapsed. My ankle just went sideways, right? It literally went on a right angle and it hurt like hell. So like my ankle goes sideways, I fall down, I take my knee off and a bunch of mud jammed in there in the rain. It's as open a wound as you're going to get. You know, it's like without actually having a bone tear its way through. I don't know if you've ever done this, but have you ever had to actually wash stuff out of a wound like that? It doesn't feel nice. Like the stinging sensation is so intense that it makes you not want to do it. And I grabbed the flap of skin and I put it back over the rest of the mud. And I can't remember if I tied anything around it, but I hobbled myself down the mountain, got to the car. And, you know, even though I had a manual car and I had to use clutch and brake and things, so it was painful driving, I got myself home. Once at home, I was looking at that and I thought to myself, yeah, well, I still don't want to wash it out completely because it's just going to hurt too much. So I thought, well, okay, what's the other alternatives here? So I just thought, okay, well, this is not too bad, really. And I just got a whole bunch of kind of padding, like, you know, cotton and things like that. And I kind of padded all stuff on top of it. I think underneath that, I did put some kind of like herbal stuff that was just something that I had on hand. I don't know, it might have been like a herbal tea or something, but it was, you know, something, you know, sort of fairly kind of, you know, herbal in nature in the fact that it would have certain antibacterial properties in it and whatever else. And so I put that on, I put the padding on and I wrapped it up and I dropped a bunch of essential oils through the padding to just kind of soak into that. So, you know, pure essential oils from plants. And you can use things like, you know, cinnamon and lemon and lavender. And I put on a whole stack of different ones. So they're kind of having that antibacterial action. Now, I'm sure because it probably took like an hour for me to hobble down the remainder of the mountain and get into my car and so forth, the bacterium in there had plenty of opportunity to go through my bloodstream. They would have gone all sorts of different places, right? Did I get necrosis? Did they take over my entire body and shut down my liver and spleen and stuff? No. You know, I got home an hour or more later, whatever it was, packed on some stuff. Now, what happens with that? It's infected, right? And I kept topping it up with new oils and stuff, but I wanted, if possible, to kind of keep that flap of skin over it to kind of keep everything in there. And I knew that what was going to happen was that pus will kind of form from all of your body's antibodies and stuff, like, so, you know, the white blood cells coming in, dealing with the stuff, all other stuff. Your body's like forming a scar. It forms a scar. It's got particles of dead leaf and dead twig and dead beetle poo and whatever else is in there in this scab that's forming, like embedded in it. And there's pus that was constantly, it was like a lot of pus. It was really gross. And I would like, push on it and like sort of, have a tissue there and kind of wipe these big sort of squirts of pus away. But over time, it dried out. What was happening in terms of the healing of the tissue underneath the scab was that new skin cells were forming and they were building up. And so eventually all those kind of pollutants in the scab are being pushed further and further away. I'm doing the good stuff by eating healthy foods, drinking plenty of water, topping up all the oils and stuff that were having that antibacterial action just to help my body along a little bit. I'm just supporting my body in doing what it knows how to do. So it forms the scab, it produces all this pus, it pushes all the garbage out, and eventually the scab falls off, taking any remaining bits and pieces with it, and you're left with skin. And I barely even have a scar left from that. One of the interesting things, and I'm not just going to go with the etymology here, like the sort of whole semantic basis of the meaning of this word is also the word pharmacy, pharmacology, all this kind of stuff. They talk here about its origins in, French, Latin, and Greek, I think. And essentially what it speaks of, and this is why I raised the point of academic libraries and internet archives, because I suspect that if they haven't already come under a form of information attack, then they will soon. And I know that this is already happening on Wikipedia, but where documents like this are being modified to change the meaning of things or to change the interpretation of things to help support narratives. And it's important that we remember what words really mean. And how they've been used in the past, because there is this whole thing about pharmacologia or whatever this origin of the word is here. So it's very small type, so it's actually hard for me to see here. But basically it meaning poisons and purveyor of poisons or creator of poisons. Now, it does have other interpretations too, but the point is that's there. And the reason I raise it is because of some homework that I want to give you. What I want you to do, and this is written here in the document, so do it, is you go off and do an internet search, and I've put some tips there, like some pro tips on doing an internet search where you're going to get like a lot of variety in your results. Search for the phrase, study of nutrients stripped from the body by common pharmaceuticals. I was already aware of the fact that this happened, but two things really stood out to me. In addition to fatty acids and proteins and vitamins and various other minerals that get stripped from the body by common pharmaceutical, magnesium and zinc. And the reason why they really stood out is because I happen to know that in both of these two cases, each of these two minerals are used in over 1,000 biochemical functions in the body. So they are extremely important nutrients. Now, if somebody is already sick, if they are already suffering a disease, if they are already in a systemic state of dysfunction, and you give them a chemical which is going to strip their body not only of other proteins, vitamins, and other mineral stuff, but it's going to strip them of these two as well, you will do them harm. You will do them harm. You will absolutely and certainly do them harm. The more serious their condition, the more likely, the more severe, the greater the consequences of the harm that you're going to do. These two things are vitally important for your health. And whether or not you personally think that harm is significant in all cases is irrelevant. What's relevant here is the fact that medicine, to be defined as therapeutic, either has to do no harm whatsoever or to do such insignificant and temporary harm that it is vastly dwarfed by the good done. Especially where somebody's already suffering a disease, they are already in a hospital or seeing a doctor, so something's already wrong, and now you're going to do something else to them. Now, it may very well be that the harm that you do is manageable by the body, And in the case of perpetual treatment, so you can keep getting money off them without curing the disease, by taking these nutrients away from the person, you have a high probability of continuing the disease or developing a new disease. It may not necessarily make them seriously sick, but you're doing them harm. Why? Because the disease is continuing or some other disease is continuing. You're making them dependent upon you instead of curing the disease. Now, unless you had a really, really, really extremely good circumstantial and most likely temporary reason for doing this, like, for example, and this is the one kind of partial caveat I've put in here. Let's say, for example, that a painkiller was to strip you of some nutrients, but you're in extreme pain and you cannot cope with that pain and it's not going away and it's difficult to treat the patient. So in such a case, fine, I could see a reason for it, but you have to go to that extreme before it's necessary. And I would argue that because of the financial incentive for perpetual in treatment, I think that there's a hell of a lot more of it going on, like where there is a far better way of approaching the treatment of the disease and trying to genuinely cure it, not just treating symptoms, not just masking them, but actually curing it. You are living in a body which has billions of sensory receptors, billions of them. You are in a position that the doctor can never be. He can't be inside you in that way. He can try to imagine it, and a really good diagnostician will do that far better than other doctors. If a person truly understands cellular chemistry, biology, biochemistry, electrochemistry, anatomy, physiology, the organs, the body functions, the body systems, if you understand a lot of that stuff, nutrition, the differences in nutritional density of different types of food, or the same type of food grown in two different ways, then you might have the capacity to take the information that your body is giving you all the time through these sensory receptors and to diagnose yourself far better and faster than a lot of doctors are going to be able to do. Now, you might get to the point of the limit of your knowledge where you say, okay, I know it's something roughly in this area, but I don't know specifically what it is. I just know that it's this type of disease. And what that allows you to do on your own is to say, well, all of these diseases have the following common traits and therefore will benefit from the following things. Now, arguably, all the things that are good for you are going to be working against any disease as a collective bunch of measures, and that should be your lifestyle. You do the healthy things, you live a healthy lifestyle, you experience health, assuming you understand what all of those things are and you haven't been misled about anything. So take, for example, the simplistic view of saying, well, apples are healthy. It's like, well, it depends on the species of apple, how it's grown and so forth. Like there are vast differences between a very, very old heritage variety of apples that you found on an apple tree in the corner of a paddock in some kind of farming area that it just hasn't never been cut down. And it's like an older variety that still has that real nutritional density there, right? That apple may be vastly better for you than one from the supermarket. It might not taste as nice. You might not be used to the taste, but it's going to be better for you. For stabilizing a patient for various reasons, sure, in those specific set of circumstances, we may do something which might have a harmful element, like, for example, anesthesia, to knock somebody out so that surgery can be performed on them. Will that anesthesia do them some harm? Sure, a lot of them do. But compare that to not doing the surgery. Well, maybe you'll die. Compare that to, having the surgery without the anesthetic and you haven't trained for a long, long time to experience pain and not react. I mean, some people can do that, but you're not going to be able to do it with having your chest ripped open for open heart surgery, are you? You have to have the person fully knocked out for certain things, no matter how well they can cope with pain. Small operations, small surgeries, fine. People might be able to, through meditation and other practices, be able to have a surgery without anesthetic. But for everything else, If you're being sold something as a therapeutic treatment, then by definition it must be therapeutic, and to strip you of nutrients cannot be therapeutic, excepting in that slight caveat of that, sure, if you're experiencing great pain, that it is therapeutic in the sense of getting rid of your pain to take a painkiller. Even if it also does some form of damage, at least you get rid of that extreme pain while the causation is being dealt with. From here, I go into causation, nutritional deficiency, and environment and tissue toxicity, because essentially I just wanted to here just drive home the point that in the absence of a contagion substance, then we need to replace why diseases seem to spread around with more than just an explanation of what's really going on with bacteria and what's really going on with funguses and mold spores, what's really going on with viruses, right? Sure, those things spread around, but they are themselves not diseases, nor do, technically speaking, they cause disease. They contribute to the formation of disease in certain people in certain circumstances. That is the correct statement. Not to say that they just blanket cause disease or the disease just manifests for no bloody reason. It can happen to anyone at any time. Bullshit, no, it can't. You really want to look into nutritional deficiency, environmental tissue toxicity, including that something which can be a nutrient, can be a toxin in higher concentrations, such as, for example, iron. There are various things you can see in the fingernails which indicate these things. You can see things in the skin. You can see things in the eyes, the iris, the white of the eye. There are loads of indicators in the body. And zinc, because as I said before, zinc is extremely useful. We use it in a lot of different things. But what a lot of people might not know is that zinc is only taken up by the body in proportion to the amount of copper that you take up. So the more copper you take up, the less zinc you can take up, right? They have this relationship to each other. More copper, less zinc. Hence, way too much copper, you'll get a zinc deficiency. And with that, you'll get all of the symptoms that start to form from a zinc deficiency. And if it continues on and combines with other things, it may manifest as a disease. Now, at first, you might only see some things on your fingernails where you get little white splotches and stuff indicating some kind of mineral deficiency. The Chinese, in the Taoist practices of health from long, long ago, I can't remember which book I was reading. It may have been something by Dr. Stephen T. Chang, who is both a Western trained doctor and he researched into all the kind of, the Taoist principles from their kind of, cultural traditions. You can do all the good things for yourself that you want, but if you don't stop doing the bad things, you're just going to undermine any good that actually happens for you from the good things you're doing. Because if you stop doing the damage, then your body's really, really good at keeping things balanced. It can go without some exercise for a little while. It can go without sunshine for a little while. It can go without all these things. Why? Because we evolved in an environment where when certain natural events would occur, we had to have the strength to make it through that period of time. We're very robust when we take care of ourselves and we know how to take care of ourselves. So by learning about this, by learning how you are influenced by all these different factors, you can remove these things which are deleterious, including those things which might be good for you in many ways, but beyond a certain point, you don't want to keep doing it because then it becomes bad for you, like the iron toxicity. And you can read this document. And in conclusion, I just wanted to remind you that disease is not a substance. Disease is a systemic state of dysfunction. That's what it is. Anybody who tells you different is lying to you. Disease, XYZ, can affect anyone at any time is a lie. No, it can't. Everything has to have a cause. If it doesn't have a cause, then it's magic. And disease is not magic, okay? It's not gremlins, it's not demons, it's not, a curse. Disease is biochemical, environmental, electromechanical, other forms of causation of whatever's doing the damage that ends up manifesting a disease. And they're not random, they're not magical, and you can understand it. And what you want to do is to learn how to keep your body in good health so that you don't become a victim of these money-making things. Now, if you need a painkiller because you are in extreme pain, fine, take a painkiller. Many years ago, I did suffer extreme migraine headaches, and it took me a while to kind of figure out and get rid of the cause. But once I did, got rid of it. I don't have them anymore. They were so extreme that I couldn't find a painkiller that actually did the job. So what I had to do whatever I could to make it through the pain, which would be 24/7, sometimes lasting weeks. And in one particular case, I think it went on for somewhere between 2 and 3 months. I describe it as being like if somebody was to drive a railway spike through your skull with a sledgehammer and then stand there kicking the end of it, right? And just that's it. That's all I felt. Just day and night, just somebody kicking the end of this railway spike they'd driven through my skull. But it also gave me the motivation, as you can well imagine, to get rid of the things out of my life that were causing it. Because the pain got so extreme that any time I thought of even the remotest risk of that pain coming back, that was all it took for me to, have an allergic reaction, like a psychological allergic reaction to anything that even looked like or smelt like it might be involved in the cause of it. So that kept a big distance between me and all potential causes. Whether I knew that they were a cause or not, I just excluded all of it. So anyway, I've been crapping on for a very, very long time. This is an extremely long video, which I'm probably going to have to turn into parts. I really, really wish you all the best in terms of your health because, as I was saying, I know what it feels like to be in extreme pain. But more importantly, do not let criminals convince you of scientific lies and fraud so that they can turn you into a guinea pig for their experiments, for their profits, and for their political agenda. Because a lot of what they are selling, particularly around these latest things, which there's court cases going on about this globally. There are people who will hang for this, and good riddance to them. This is how you understand how not to be fooled again, to understand what is health, what is disease, what is a system, what is your systemic state, and how do you understand the component parts which keep you in health and keep you away from disease. Thank you all, and I wish you the best. Cheers.